At first glance, this looks like an ordinary flea market. Old objects, rusted metal, broken toys, things that once belonged to someone else. Most people would keep walking, but the longer you look, the stranger it becomes. Your eyes move from object to object without choosing one. A worn teddy, tiny statues, old doll heads, a faded red character sitting among figures that no longer seem alive. Nothing here is dangerous, yet something feels strangely uncomfortable. Maybe it isn't the objects themselves. Maybe it's what they represent. Every item here once mattered to someone. Someone held these toys for the first time. Someone carried them home. Someone laughed because of them. Someone cried when they broke. Now they're sitting on a folding table, waiting for another stranger. Childhood doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes it simply changes owners. That thought makes this image feel heavier than it first appears, because memories are strange things. They don't belong to places. They don't belong to objects. They belong to people. Yet objects can still carry the feeling of a life that has already moved on. That's why antique shops, flea markets, and forgotten collections often feel different from ordinary stores. You aren't just looking at products, you're looking at pieces of someone's past. The doll heads near the bottom of this image are especially unsettling, not because they're broken, not because they're old, but because they've lost everything that once gave them meaning. A toy without imagination becomes plastic. A souvenir without a story becomes decoration. An object without memory becomes just another object, unless someone gives it a new one. Perhaps that's why some people love collecting old things, not because they need them, but because they enjoy imagining the lives that came before. Who owned this? Where did it travel? Why was it kept for so long? And why was it finally left behind? Those questions can never really be answered. Yet we ask them anyway. Notice the red figure near the top. Unlike the others, it still has bright color. It immediately catches your attention, not because it's the most valuable object, because it's the most familiar. Recognition is powerful. The human brain notices familiar shapes before almost anything else. That's why one object can dominate an entire scene, not because it's larger, because memory points toward it. The rest of the table slowly fades into the background, and suddenly you're no longer observing the market. You're observing yourself. Why did your eyes stop there? Why not somewhere else? What made that one object different? Perhaps the answer has nothing to do with the object itself. Perhaps it has everything to do with your own experiences. Someone else might notice the old statues. Another person might only see the doll heads. Someone else might completely ignore everything except the rusted frame. The photograph stays exactly the same. Only the observer changes. That's the quiet lesson hidden here. We often believe we see the world objectively, but we don't. We notice what connects to us. Our memories decide where our attention goes long before we realize we're looking. In that sense, every photograph becomes a mirror, not of the place, of the person observing it. Maybe that's why scenes like this stay with us, not because they're beautiful, not because they're rare, but because they gently remind us that every forgotten object was once part of an ordinary life, and every ordinary life eventually becomes someone else's history. Perhaps nothing here is valuable anymore, or perhaps everything is. It simply depends on who's looking. So before you scroll away, look one more time. What was the first thing you noticed? And what does that say about you?